everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a great show for you, and let's take a look at some of the stories we're going to be talking about today. We are starting with live updates from the Brittney Griner situation. Brittney Griner, just this morning, has been freed. She's an American basketball star who has been imprisoned in Russia on drug charges, and she was traded for Victor Bout, a Russian arms dealer. President Biden said Griner would be back in the United States within 24 hours. Big deal. Also, we'll take a look at the GOP losses in the midterms and some new evidence showing that Republicans did turn out, but they just didn't vote for their own party. Also, an interesting article about the Daily Wire, the right-wing media company founded by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring, is trying to make something cool. The city of Nashville turning into the Hollywood for conservatives. Can they do it? Also, we'll take a look at an interesting call and a very important call in the wake of these rail strikes that we've been seeing in Jackboot magazine to do something that we all, any smart, rational person would want. We'll tell you what that is, but you got to stick around till the end. It's Newsflash. All right, ladies and gentlemen, some big news ever since, the beginning of, I think it was about, a few months, 3-4 months into the Russia war with Ukraine. Brittney Griner tried to get on the plane, or maybe it was probably earlier than that. Brittney Griner tried to go get on the plane. I think it's also, very, very interesting because you got to give the full context of the situation. Brittney Griner, one of the most well-known WNBA players, so she's really just an icon for young girls, especially young girls of color who are trying to get into, sports that are just, always dominated by the guys. So she is, one of the big stars in the WNBA, which really kind of had a surge in the past, 10 years, I'd say. But it still isn't, not a very popular, not a very, fairly distributed revenue making. It doesn't make a lot of revenue, and the revenue that it's made is not really, distributed fairly. And I think that is a big, big deal. And that is, ultimately the reason why Brittney Griner, one of the most popular, essentially, not like a LeBron James, like unquestionable superstar type figure, but she's definitely, one of the top players in the league for sure. But she even still had to get on a plane and go play in the offseason in Russia for a Russian semi-pro or pro league of some kind, because that was more profitable for her during the offseason. She actually made more money in the offseason from the WNBA than her time in, when she spent playing in Russia, than her time actually in America. Where she was the big star, and a lot more people knew who she was. She kind of had to sneak up in Russia to play or not sneak off, but go to probably something she didn't want to do. Really, is go into play basketball over the off season in Russia like that, which is what she had to do again because it was more profitable. But she, on a clear kind of political prisoner situation, tried to, she, snuck her, weed pen, her oil pen. This is about, to put in perspective, it's like a, literally probably the size of a pen in every way. Just instead of, containing ink, it contains, concentrated weed oil. And that was what the Russian TSA apparently found in her luggage when she tried to go back to play. She was arrested, put in. She was supposed to be in a Siberian penal colony for about 9 years, and then obviously Joe Biden today did announce that she was free. So it's definitely definitely a very cool situation. She was. This is some of the remarks that he made earlier today. In the White House, speaking to some of the media members there, with Kamala and Brittney Griner's wife by his side.
Moments ago, standing together with her wife Sherelle in the Oval Office, I spoke with Brittney Griner. She's safe. She's on a plane. She's on her way home after months of being unjustly detained in Russia, held under intolerable circumstances. Brittney will soon be back in the arms of her loved ones, and she should have been there all along. This is a day we've worked toward for a long time. We never stopped pushing for her release. It took painstaking and intense negotiations, and I want to thank all the hard-working public servants across my administration who worked tirelessly to secure her release. I'm glad to be able to say that Brittney's in good spirits. She's relieved to finally be heading home, and the fact remains that she's lost months of her life, experienced a needless trauma, and she deserves space, privacy, and time with her loved ones to recover and heal. We never forgot about Brittney. We've not forgotten about Paul Whelan, who's been unjustly detained in Russia for years. This was not a choice of which American to bring home. We brought home Trevor Reed when we had a chance early this year. Sadly, for totally illegitimate reasons, Russia is treating Paul's case differently than Brittney's. And while we have not yet succeeded in securing Paul's release, we are not giving up. We will never give up.
Yeah, so Paul Whelan there, there was a U.S. Marine kind of reference that caused some kind of backlash against people who were frankly kind of, a little uninformed. So it obviously received a lot of positive reaction from the WNBA sports all across the place. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert on Thursday commended the Biden administration and the State Department for brokering the prisoner swap that freed American basketball star Brittney Griner from Russian detention, praising their commitment and willingness to negotiate a deal. All right. Also, though, the biggest thing that we've seen is some of the whining from Republicans here. Some Republicans on Thursday lashed out at Biden for his decision to trade a convicted arms dealer. Victor Bout Victor Boot, I think is his name. For his decision to trade a convicted arms dealer for Brittney Griner, the WNBA basketball star being held in Russia, and for failing to secure the release of another American held hostage for years. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas, said in a statement that the release of Griner should not have come at the cost of releasing one of the world's most dangerous arms dealers and creating a dangerous precedent for our enemies. Detained Americans and Democrats will set your worst killers free. Mr. Cotton, who's often sharply critical of Biden's foreign policy, said it was a mistake to release Victor Boot, a Russian known as the Merchant of Death, for arming some of what Cotton called America's worst enemies. So yeah, again, there's people, America has a gazillion guys exactly like this guy, Victor Boot. So every serious country in the world, every country with a, military and aspirations of, evil are going to have people who are kind of associated with them, cutouts, associated, tied to a defense contractor within the company. America has people like this as well. And of course, it's kind of takes essentially, obviously the price you have to pay to get a prisoner out of prison is, you do have to give something up. As Antony Blinken said, the choice was one or none. Referring to efforts to bring Whelan home alongside Griner. So they were never ever going to be able to get two, is essentially what he said. So Representative Michael McCall of Texas, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said the decision to release spouse whose sentence was not due to end until 2029 will only encourage more countries to take Americans hostage in the future. So it's just, it's not something really that seems to be, based off of any logic, but it is very clear and good to see, obviously, Brittney Griner coming home. Ending what's kind of, been a little bit of a, cultural, back and forth, just like everything has been, with Brittney Griner. Some jokes being made about the WNBA by Republicans and, just how irrelevant it is. But, at least, they're saying this stuff here through gritted teeth, just getting their one shot off at Biden. And, some people, there's this Dallas Cowboys player, I think rookie or something, who got a lot of attention just by being like, they should have brought the Marine home. Like, what was Joe Biden thinking? Like, I don't know, obviously that got him in a bit of online backlash as well. All right, let's go to our next story here. This is also in the New York Times by Nate Cohn. So he writes, after yet another disappointing showing for Republicans like Georgia's Senate runoff on Tuesday, some conservatives like Sean Hannity, Newt Gingrich, and Kevin McCarthy have begun to point to a surprising culprit. Now, guys, they're getting mad at Republicans for not early voting enough. Before, it was, early voting under Trump. Obviously, early voting is a tool of the Democrats to bring partisan political fraud. We got to start focusing on election integrity. This is what your conservative uncles were saying to you, because they were watching these very people telling them to do exactly that. But yeah, so the theory seems to be that Republicans are losing because early voting is giving Democrats a turnout edge. It follows a similar conversation after the midterm elections, when a course of conservatives said Republicans need to start encouraging mail-in voting, which is going to be a bit of a problem, guys. So here, it's like once you've already just built such strong kind of cultural memories, at least on the Republican side, of just Donald Trump coming out, attacking that early voting, saying at least to all these kind of problems of election integrity that need to be fixed and dealt with. We got to have a serious problem about all this danger, fear-mongering rhetoric about mail-in voting. It really hurt them, especially on Tuesday night in Georgia. Here is Gingrich and Hannity kind of coming to that realization.
I think Republicans have been unwilling, for whatever reason, reluctant, resistant to voting early and voting by mail. Do they have to get over that reluctance, that resistance?
For whatever reason. Sure. Again, this was for whatever reason. Yeah, this is obviously really just remarkable because obviously 2 years ago they spent this exact same time period, this run up to from the election to January 6th, just being all this ridiculous fear mongering over how bad mail-in voting was and how much of a COVID power grab represented by the Democrats. But in fact, it's been around for such a long time. It's been so politicized, and not enough Republicans are going to be able to turn out on that election day. If mail-in voting is just so strictly discouraged in a close state like Georgia here. So there you go.
Sure. Look, I mean, you have to play the game by the rules that are existing. That means, for example, if you want Generation Z voters, you've got to be on TikTok, even if, in fact, in the long run, we may abolish TikTok as a Chinese communist device.
I think Republicans have been unwilling.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like you still got to use the Chinese. That's a very interesting, kind of Republican mindset there. It's like, and it kind of just it does enable you to see how they've been so effective politically, because not only do they have the institutional advantage of the they are fighting for the interests of the entire establishment, the entire collected group of powerful interests. Like, they're fighting for them. They're the political representatives of them in the pseudo-democratic halls of power, but on the other side, you have, they are really, unlike the Democrats, really willing to use all the political tools at their disposal at the moment. They look hard at these situations. They say, hey, this is something that we can do differently. This is something that we may not like it, but we need to kind of suck it up and do what we need to do now so that we can win. And it actually does. A lot of times you can see the results, from these kind of long-term instances down the line. They take, some kind of short-term L's that, for example, in this situation with Roe v. Wade, the midterm elections, the short-term L, but the long-term W, you got Roe v. Wade overturned, something that you've been building towards for years and years and years, and something that your base really, really wants. So it's it's an interesting kind of insight there. But as more data becomes available on turnout in this year's election, it becomes quite clear. The thing is, the turnout was not the main problem facing Republicans. In state after state, the final turnout rates showed that registered Republicans turned out a higher rate, and in some places much higher rate, than registered Democrats, including in many states where Republicans were dealt some of their most embarrassing high-profile losses. Instead, Republicans like Herschel Walker in Georgia or Blake Masters of Arizona lost because Republican-leaning voters decided to cast their ballots for Democrats, even as they voted for Republican candidates for U.S. House or other down-ballot races in their states. So this is something that I think both sides should take really close attention to. I think this further shows what we've seen so much talk about with the GOP's Trump dilemma, the fact that they are not going to be successful politically. As long as they continue to stick by Trump, they're going to be dealt with these quote unquote heard a lot of talk about this, like the idea of the normal white voter, the white voter who just wants to kind of see things run smoothly, of kind of a middle to upper class persuasion. A lot of times they voted Republican. A lot of times they felt like their interests would be more protected. They voted Republican. This election. This was now reality for the Democrats. Yeah, it definitely shows that, these people, who have voted for, again, keep in mind, have voted for Republican for a long time, but have recently been turned off by, Trump and his acolytes just acting all crazy. That I think that piece of news looks a lot better for Republicans because it shows them, I think, a much clearer path on, what they have to do to go back. But if you're looking for the Democrats, like, if you're looking, for example, say like Raphael Warnock, if Raphael Warnock is up against a Brian Kemp type figure, he was up against, zero charisma Kelly Loeffler and Herschel Walker. It is absolutely, it's not like he had the biggest or the best, array of candidates, the best thing the Republican Party to throw out. If you went up against somebody like, Brian Kemp, especially with his strategy of, which really was, frankly, just winning over those kind of soft Republicans and independents, not boosting turnout in these cities. That we saw, like the preferred strategy of Stacey Abrams, which saw where it got her. On the other hand, but she may not. To be fair, she may not have been the best example for it, but. It does show you, if I were the Democrats looking at this article today, I would be a lot more worried because it shows you that, they don't have a, clear, coherent strategy other than just like what it's always been. Same way Joe Biden relied on Donald Trump to be bad, the same way that Raphael Warnock relied on Herschel Walker to be bad. And they just, they frankly just got lucky because that's the way the Republican Party is going at this time, which it can be, which it can be, very easily done. That it can be the Ron DeSantis types take control of the party, and also it could be frankly that they lose the base with them. It's a coalition that could be united. With I think more likely than not a coalition that could be united by a Brian Kemp type figure who accurately kind of stokes the media, plays the culture wars, but is not still can keep track of those, still keep those soft independents on the Republican side. And I think if he's able to do that, Georgia stays red easily. If there's a Brian Kemp or, for example, a lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan, who said as the results were coming in, he did not vote for Raphael Warnock because he just thought Raphael Warnock was too crazy. If that guy, the literal lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia, the Republican lieutenant governor, will not vote for Raphael Warnock, Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker, because he's too crazy, that is really a sign of how many votes Georgia Republicans are left on the table by having this guy up as, Senate nominee, and shows you that the strategy that Warnock used, frankly, to win in the long run at this, both last time and this time, and the strategy the Democrats have built a lot of their success in the Trump era on, is not going to work long term. People have said this. People have said this over and over and over again. But the thing is here again, this all depends on if they are able to get the crazy out of the party and what effect that has, which frankly right now also is just as big an if. My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps. Make SWR content better. And thank you so much for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on March 22nd, 2021, something frankly remarkable happened. The Tennessee General Assembly sent a resolution to the governor's desk full of lofty sentiment. The document evokes such figures like John Adams and Ronald Reagan and officially welcomes to Tennessee the Daily Wire, a media company, and its co-founder and editor, Ben Shapiro, who has truthfully said, "Facts don't care about your feelings." That's a direct quote, from the from the resolution signed by some of the smartest people in Tennessee. That's where they put them on the General Assembly. 2 days later, the government signed it. Starting in 2015, the online hub for clicky conservative news and culture warring. The Daily Wire is closely associated with Shapiro, a crusading right-wing political squabbler, and now the site's editor emeritus. But it is Shapiro's co-founder and the company's co-CEO, writer and filmmaker named Jeremy Boring, who's trying to make the Daily Wire less boring. So can Mr. Boring succeed? I just love the fact that he's called boring. Like, these people, just take a look, really what the Daily Wire is. It's just kind of really frankly pretentious conservative media outlet that's could not be more clearly started by people who wanted to have glitzy Hollywood lifestyles, but then just kind of failed, and that bitterness turned them to conservatism. I think Jeremy Boring had a background in this, if I remember correctly, but they were very, very ambitious. They try and do these these film screenings where they sit around in tuxedos and cigars. They even try to put on their own film too. I think not much success a few years back. Like, they're definitely people who try who think that we can change the culture. We don't have to deal with liberal Hollywood anymore. We can make our own liberal Hollywood, and that's what frankly what they're trying to do in Nashville. So we'll see. For years, the Daily Wire's headquarters were in L.A., in the dream factory of coastal liberal America. Then, in the fall of 2020, the company moved to Nashville with the goal of expanding to become an all-you-can-eat buffet of conservative entertainment, complete with its own streaming platform and production house. Which is really kind of exciting, because I thought Fox Nation was the main streaming platform for conservatives, but again, this is kind of we're trying to reset the culture, funded by dark money that no one really quite knows where it comes from, and it's just really not producing any entertaining content. They're just focused on just this grand vision. Have the most expensive looking, nice looking platforms, but the content they're actually creating is just not it just does not seem to be resonating so much in the same way. Many on the right believe that mainstream news and mainstream entertainment serve the same liberal agenda. In Nashville, though, of course, they imagine we could get past that. Boring isn't shy about his succession-sized aspirations for the venture. During an interview in his office, he keeps a collection of luxury watches in an oversized safe, as Boring tried to compare himself to the media baron Rupert Murdoch. I mean, it's just it's so these people are just such the best thing that they're capable of doing. Is maybe putting on a glitzy YouTube live stream and sit around with some moving camera angles in a studio that someone else frankly paid for. It is not the company that has the capability of because they don't have the money for it. Like, the money for them just grows on trees, but it is the fact that they're just not talented enough, because they're just too bitter. They're too obsessed with making everything political, everything cultural. They're just not they're just not normal enough, frankly. Is really what it is. Because when you got Hollywood, you got definitely political people, but they came to the politics second. They came to the art. They came to the obsession of whatever all the personality traits that makes the struggling actor. They came to those first, and they eventually became successful actors. These people, they started as political nerds who then eventually kind of got these delusions of grandeur that they can become the conservative Hollywood after their need for celebrity kind of died down as well. Nashville is an entertainment capital, but not for film or television. The politics of the country are complex, and the city of itself votes blue. The Daily Wire's production house is still under construction as the company tries to construct an ad hoc conservative creative class in its new home. Still, Boring is optimistic that a market for what he's selling still exists, even if he's building the product on the fly. It's a little bit of the Elon Musk model. Oh my. He said in his office, the location of which the company keeps guarded as a precaution against what he calls the extreme fringe on both ends of the political spectrum. There is not yet a factory in which we will build the Cybertruck, a vehicle for which Mr. Musk, the Tesla CEO, opened pre-orders for several years before it was scheduled to go into production, but we would love to sell you one. This is that kind of idea of just, for example, this is the kind of classic American fraud of just it's coming just in a few more years, just keep sinking that money and keep getting that investment in, that we've seen so many times, especially since the 2000s rolled around, of just this, this endless investing, endless just, funds being sunk into something, and when it gets there, it's kind of a shell of itself, or it may not, for example, in the case of Theranos, may not even come at all and just be a complete and total fraud. One simple principle explains almost every aspect of the Daily Wire. Culture war as entertainment. A format flexible, monofocus on the bitter conflicts that can dominate American public life. Among Daily Wire's regular targets are diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, the alleged censorship of conservatives by social media companies, and a variety of issues affecting gay and transgender Americans. So pretty much what these people all are in spirit, they think they're these big Hollywood people. They think they're trying to make a big streaming company and trying to be the next Netflix. But really, like, they're just angry conservative YouTubers. And that's who they are, and that's who they always will be. And if they all they can really make a movie about is just some sort of, like, movie version of Drag Queen Story Hour getting interrupted. Isn't that so bad? Because, like, they are just not, frankly, they're just not creative on that level. Mr. Shapiro, who sets the tone for the company, is famous for attacking progressives as fragile and freedom-hating on his college tours, which regularly galvanize campus protests. They haven't really galvanized protests in a, frankly, very long time. And on his podcast, which ranks among the top 20 most popular shows in Apple Podcasts, he's unabashedly socially conservative. Shapiro has said that transgenderism is a mental illness and that a man and woman do a better job raising children than same-sex couples do. I think that's actually clinically proven to be not true, but whatever. In a November speech in Texas A&M, he's pretty much he's a very, very far right-wing person. So interestingly enough, though, when Congress announced the Bipartisan Respect for Marriage Act meant to safeguard the right to same-sex marriage, it garnered some Republican supports, and even Fox News ran supportive op-eds. Shapiro took to his podcast to denounce it. The fact that many of the Republicans went along with this, he said, man, this party needs an overhaul. Daily Wire is not a big tent media company, Ms. Drennan said. They are very interested in going after the 30% radical base that will pay them subscription fees. And again, I think that Drennan is from Ari Drennan is from Media Matters. So she gave that quote. I think she's really, frankly, absolutely right. And that really shows you why whatever they're going to do here, isn't going to be successful. It's not going to fail because it's going to be kept afloat by big money. But the only thing these people can do well, only thing conservatives can do well, because they're just too not creative and just too angry, is angry YouTube videos. And that is what they will, as far as I'm concerned, continue to do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for our last story of the day. I'm just scrolling through Twitter. Like, Ben Shapiro, he's just talking about, like, grooming and, like, the calling people groomers and not. Like, just the same culture war stuff that already clearly lost Republicans the election. So I think it's kind of very, very silly that stuff still continues to be, such a big deal. He's considered some sort of, like, big, uniting progressive or, right-wing force. But anyway, time to go to our last story. This is in Jacobin today by Luke W. Savage. He writes, earlier this year, the federal board charged with overseeing America's rail network called a hearing to discuss widespread complaints about higher costs and poor service. Predictably enough, rail executives sought to blame the pandemic and labor shortage for the likes of gridlock and supply chain breakdowns. But dysfunction on America's railroads is neither a product of COVID-19 nor the result of nebulous constructs like the so-called Great Resignation. As Matthew Buck explained earlier this year in an article for the American Prospect, the single biggest contributors have been corporate monopolism and financialization, both of which contributed to horrendous working conditions at the center of the recent showdown in Congress. Thanks in large part to Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan-era deregulation, American rail has steadily become more consolidated, the number of major carriers shrinking from 40 to just 7 between 1980 and the present day. Unsurprisingly, there's little evidence that this shift has made rail transport any more efficient. It has, however, made the business incredibly lucrative. In an effort to wring as much profit from railways as possible, company barons have in turn cut costs, laid off workers, and introduced a host of changes ostensibly geared to the improving the quality of service. Central to this project is something called PSR, which is precision scheduled railroading. So Matthew Buck explains this concept. Railroad management's job is to drive down the operating ratio, or operating expenses as a percentage of revenue. In other words, Wall Street judges railroad success based in part on spending less money running the railroad and more on stock buybacks or dividends. Theoretically, focusing on lowering operating ratios pushes railroads to be more efficient, to do more with less. But when railroads have the market power that they have today, they can do less with less, as shippers and workers put it. So they just, they don't have to really have any kind of major competition because there's only really 7 of them. So they can just have very, very poor service, and then, the strain always falls to the workers, and then, way, way, way more indirectly, the customers with higher prices and stuff. The upshot, in addition to appalling conditions for ever-diminishing workforce, is that railways, a basic utility relied upon millions every day for commerce and transport, are now treated as more than ever as an asset designed to be milked for profit than a service structured to meet a need. And I think that is really when it comes to this main point. One lesson in that in all of this is that an enterprise can be profitable and thus efficient in a narrow business sense without actually working particularly well or operating effectively to service the needs around it which it's ostensibly erected. Like, it can be efficient in the in the capitalist way, make money for the right people, but still not perform its actual service efficiently. This is true in most industries, but it has always been true in the case of rail. As the late historian Tony Judt once explained, the very idea of competitive market-based railroads is, for straightforward reasons, fundamentally incoherent. You cannot run trains competitively. Railways, like agriculture or the mail, are at one and the same, an economic activity and essential public good. Moreover, you cannot render a rail system more efficient by placing 2 trains on the same track and waiting to see which performs better. Railways are a natural monopoly. Trains, like buses, are above all a social service. And then something that, for a country to run better, for a country to run more efficiently, and for a country to run, in a way I think people can be proud of, and a way where services are respected and always guaranteed and looked after, that I think is the best case for this instituting this kind of nationalization, because it is just such a big importance in public service that just cannot be efficiently. We're seeing the ideal free market situation with the railroads right now, and just by every metric in every way, everything is just clearly getting worse. So I think that is something that you have to take into account when you're looking at this. I mean, freshly reimposed by a democratically controlled Congress without substantive modification, these horrendous conditions are a potent symbol of what happens when essential public good like rail is turned over to Wall Street. Smashing the monopolies, introducing stricter regulation, and giving workers paid time off would certainly be a good start. But for the sake of its supply chains, transport needs, and basic economic fairness, however, what America ultimately needs is a single national railway owned and operated in the public good. Wouldn't that be nice? A little bit of wish casting there from Luke Savage in the Jacobin magazine to end the show. That's all we got for you guys today. We will be back on Tuesday.